Yes, indeed. Welcome back, everybody, to Black Power Media, to our Mix What I Like right here again. I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. Brother Diallo, it's good to see you again. We're joined, of course, by Geechee as well. And our special guest this morning is Nkechi Taifa, who, among many other things, is a visionary and seasoned professional with 40 years of experience as an accomplished justice system reform strategist, advocate, and scholar. She is an exceptional leader who advances creative, cutting-edge approaches that encourage out-of-the-box thinking and action. She has pursued justice as a litigator, lobbyist, academician, advocate, policy analyst, community organizer, convener, and great grant maker, and more. Her full link and to the full link to her full bio and work is in the show description. Sister Taifa, welcome. Good morning. Good to see you again.
Totally glad to be with you. I am psyched up and I'm ready to roll.
So the short of it is, we saw your recent TEDx talk on reparations, and wanted to invite you here to continue our discussion of that topic and to give you as much time and us as much time to get into it as possible. So first of all, congratulations on the talk. It was very well done. I know you had to cover a lot in a short period of time, which is not easy to do, including some of your own life story. So before we get into any of our questions or comments and discussion, could you sort of set the table for us in terms of outlining a little bit of what you said there, or what you would want us to know about both your life and approach to the topic, and how you see the issue and struggle around reparations today?
Thank you so very much, my brother Jared Ball. Well, let me just set the table this way, if I may. Not reflected in my talk, which was for a large generalized audience. I touched on it just a teeny bit, but I start off as a revolutionary. That's not in my bio. Okay, I didn't start off as a seasoned professional, justice system strategist, etc., etc., etc. I started off as a revolutionary, and I sat and I learned at the feet of other revolutionaries, names many of which have been swept under the rug and have essentially been erased from history. Now, people are beginning to bring up a sanitized Queen Mother Moore, but I sat at her feet, and let me tell you, she was not sanitized. We're talking about someone who was at the forefront at just about every single reparations movement, from the Garvey era all the way up through to her death. I sat at the feet of Brother President Dr. Imari Abubakari Obadeli. Most folk don't know anything about him whatsoever, but actually the roots of the modern era reparations movement leads back to the revolutionaries at the feet of Chokwe Lumumba. I mean, most folk don't know, and no, I did not mention it in my TED talk, but back in 1987, there was this little book here. I don't know if we can see it on the screen, called Reparations. Yes, the legal and political reasons why new Africans, Black people in the United States, should be paid now for the enslavement of our ancestors and for war against us after slavery. This was 1987, co-authored by Chokwe Lumumba, Amari Abubakari Obadeli, and little old me, Nkechi Taifa. This predated Nkoba. This predated, it even predated the birth of many people out there on the internet right now talking about reparations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't hear anything about texts like this. Okay. Not only do you not hear about it in the mainstream, most folk in the revolution, today don't really know about these predecessors. Queen Mother Moore, I want to go back to her. And the reason why I want to focus on some of these, because anyone can pull up YouTube and see my sanitized TEDx talk, which some folk don't feel it's sanitized. They feel it's really cutting edge and all like that. But there are roots to that. Queen Mother Moore, one of the original signers, the first signer of the New African Declaration of Independence in 1968, made sure that was inserted in that declaration that, and I'm quoting from memory, quote, "We claim no rights from the United States other than those rights belonging to oppressed people wherever they exist in the world, and these include the right to damages, reparations due us for the grievous harm sustained against ourselves and our ancestors by reason of U.S. lawlessness." We were talking about Reparations. Again, this book, Reparations, yes, it's not just reparations in the abstract. This book was dedicated in 1987 to Sundiata Acoli, now free. It was dedicated to Tariq James Haskins, now free. Herman Bell, now free. Albert Noah Washington, deceased. Jalil Muntakim, now free. Masai El Hosi, now free. Daruba bin Wahad, now free. Kubwa Obadeli, Sekou Odinga, now free. Geronimo Jijaga, now free, but ancestor. Rico Forbes, Ramona Africa, now free. Matulu Shakur. Matulu, I just must say, still fighting for his life, for his very life, being denied parole yet again, suffering from stage 4 bone marrow cancer. This book was dedicated to him while he was in prison, back then. Leonard Peltier, still in prison, and all of our brothers and sisters of our struggle who are soldiers, and the fallen white anti-imperialists who have supported us, held much too long in U.S. jails as common criminals because the United States refuses to acknowledge the legitimacy of our struggle for land and independence. So those are the roots. You don't see this in solidarity stuff. You know what I'm saying? You don't see it in the stuff with people who are propped up by mainstream media, but the roots of what we see today, what we see spreading all across the country, what we see in California, just issued yesterday, in terms of the interim report of the California Reparations Task Force, they don't know or don't wish to highlight these roots of the current day reparations movement. And I feel it must be. So anyway, back to TED Talk.
Let me just say, can I just say something real quick? And I like to, when I think of it, I like to frame it this way: that I'm really happy you brought up the political prisoner work that you've been involved with for a long time, and that I like to say, I like to think of it this way: the one time I've been invited to your house, you had Sekou Odinga in the basement.
Well, actually, before Sekou, when Daruba came out, he came to the house. When Geronimo Jijaga came out, we had a big celebration for him. When Daruba, we said Daruba came out, and also when Sekou came out, we had a celebration at my house. So I don't know what you mean by the one time. You always invited to my house.
No, that was the only one I was at. That's more of a statement about me, not you. But I just like to say that the point is, I just like to say it that way. The one time I was over there, you had a political prisoner hanging out in the basement. It's like you had a superhero in the basement. So I, definitely all respect to that. Anyway, yeah. Go ahead. I interrupted you. You were going to talk about the TED Talk.
Okay, so it's dealing with the issue of reparations. It's called Reparations, an Issue Whose Time Has Come. And I do sprinkle it a teeny weeny bit with my personal story. I started out when I'm 16 years old selling Black Panther paper newspapers on the streets of Washington. And the first time I'm really seeing about reparations, looking at their 10-point program, point number 3, I'm getting it mixed up with the new African Declaration of Independence right now. Point number 3, Black Panther. We believe that this racist government has robbed us, and now we are demanding the overdue debt of 40 acres and 2 mules. Not sure where they got the 2 from. 40 acres and 2 mules.
Because if you want 5, you got to ask for 10. That's what I was doing.
Promised 100 years ago for slave labor and mass murder of Black people. We will accept the payment in currency, which will be distributed to our many communities. I'm looking at this. I said, dang, wow. Sounded good to me. So I was talking about reparations and all like that. And people looking at me side-eyed and, saying, Nkechi, you want militant self and, all that kind of stuff. But I kept it up. And as I became involved in movements again that have reparation. Jared, just about every nationalist and Pan-Africanist movement back then in the 60s and 70s had the issue of reparations in some type of way, shape, form, and fashion as part of its agenda. It wasn't anything. It was just something that you do because it was old. It was correct. But I got to be very honest. Okay. Little did I know that we would see the type of momentum that we are seeing today. Even when we worked with John Conyers to formulate HR 40, and let me tell you this, this is a story behind the story. Why not all of us agree with no legislative approach and doing a study bill? I said, God dang, we didn't study this issue long enough. I mean, I'm just saying the movement was not monolithic then. It's not monolithic now. But the difference between then and now, we interacted in a civilized manner. We didn't even know about COINTELPRO at the time. We really didn't. This was pre COINTELPRO knowledge really, coming out. But, we agreed to disagree. And those who decided to go on and support the legislative route did it. Those who decided they didn't want to support it didn't. It wasn't no name calling and mudslinging and all that and stuff that we see today, character assassination. Wasn't none of that. In fact, quiet as it's kept, we operated as civilized human beings should operate. Even when there were dissensions and issues in the movement, there was a huge issue in the movement. The movement which really brought about the mainstreaming of the reparations issue, the movement of the New African Independence movement, I would call, there were dissensions between Brother Amari and Brother Chokwe, yet they came together to do this booklet here. And Amari was my political mentor and Chokwe was my legal mentor, and folk agreed to disagree and went for the sake of the movement, had operational unity, which ended up leading to the formation of NCOBA, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, which might not have come about because of COINTELPRO if the movement had been mudslinging and all that kind of stuff. But we were able to surpass all those things. And I'm kind of getting
That's because Amari and Chokwe didn't have Twitter accounts to protect. They didn't have, like if they, they didn't have, they didn't have to get mean in these social media streets. That
is a really interesting, that's an interesting point. Who knows what would have happened if there had been mass social media during those days? But I will say this, people today just look at what happened in the past. We didn't know about it because, they would kept the COINTELPRO hidden. And when they sent the stuff, all the pages would be redacted and all like that. But people know about all that now. And if you know that there's orchestrated governmental intrigues and all like that to separate people and keep them, wouldn't you kind of take a step back and say, well, maybe I'm not going to help U.S. governmental forces along, And I don't think we take enough of looking back at history with respect to that. So anyway, back to the TED Talk. Okay, right, yeah. So one of the things I sought to do in it was to bring up things that I didn't even know coming up and coming along. Okay, I didn't know, and I'm a DC native Washingtonian. Okay, but of course, when I was coming up in school, I'm a little. Hopefully, I don't look as old as I am, but I'm a little bit more seasoned in age than it might appear. But when I was going to elementary and junior high school in the 60s and in the very early high school, very early 70s, there was not a course, I'm sure, and I know there is now, but dealing with DC history, where it taught that reparations were in fact paid at the end of the enslavement era. They just weren't paid to Black folk. They were paid to the former white slave owners. I didn't know about that, so I put that in my talk. I'm a history major in college, Howard University. Okay, as a history major, I'm not saying I wasn't taught or whatever, but I wasn't. But I did not know. We'll just say that I did not learn until much later. And most of the stuff I've learned about anything dealing with our history, I learned on my own through all of my massive book collections and all like that. But I didn't know that Haiti, which won its independence in 1803, was forced to pay reparations to France all the way up through 1947, long after those who were enslaved and those who directly enslaved them. I didn't know about that. And, it's interesting. There was this big New York Times story that came out just last week about that. I mean, just last week, which I know came under a lot of criticism because they failed to, again, acknowledge people whose names are swept under the rug, who really doing the work and all like that. But it's like, these are some of the things I sought to highlight. I also didn't know, Brother Jared Ball, that Britain, when it abolished slavery back in I forgot when it was. Now it's in my TED talk. It could have been 1833. Was it that?
30
Whatever.
something, I thought, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, something. I gotta look back on that. But pay reparation. They ain't paying it to black folk. Again, paid it to white folks, and those payments were still going on. We ain't talking about no ancient history. Those payments still went on through 2015. Paying white folks, paying the descendants of the white terrorists, genocidal slave owners, the descendants. Yeah. I also didn't know, and I didn't find out that this through, I forgot which one of the comedians, Reginald, I forgot which comedian or whatever, but I didn't know that in the late 1800s, the descendants of 11 Italian lynching victims in New Orleans, I didn't know Italians were lynched, but there were 11 Italian lynching victims in New Orleans. Their descendants were paid reparations by the United States government. I'm thinking, how many of us been lynched? I mean, I'm just saying. So all those little tidbits I stuck in my TED Talk. I also talked about the growing momentum of the issue amongst sororities and fraternities and civic groups and civil rights organizations, human rights groups, cities, states, of course, the federal government, corporations, amalgamated by things that, average people don't necessarily know about this momentum. So I kind of stuck stuff along those lines in it. So it's just filled with little tidbits, sprinkled with some of my personal story, I guess you could say. I'm looking on the internet, Jared, at TED, and I said TED reparation. I only came up with like 4 talks on reparations. One, of course, was Solidarity, the darling of the media, but it wasn't a real TED talk. I mean, dang, I wish I could have done it like him. He had to memorize all that shit. I mean, I said, oh my God, if anybody knows anything about me, I do a lot of public speaking, but I swear, I always have my notes in my script. And when Ted said, no, you gotta memorize, I said, oh Lord. So anyway, Darity's was not a talk where you're standing up and talking. It was like an interview, a Q&A. So it wasn't really whatever. And then there was one by a young brother, I think an ADOS type or whatever. It's a young brother. Okay, cool. And there was a sister who was, I forgot what it was, comparing it to health or dance or something along those lines. I'm looking, wow, where's the academic stuff, on reparations. So I'm hoping that my TED talk, reparations and issues, time has come, helps to fill some of that gap. I'm waiting for Ray Winbush. Let me see, I got his thing here. I mean, we talk about academics. Should America pay? Slavery and the raging debate on reparation. This ain't nothing new. This came out a long time ago.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you, and I want to let Diallo and Geechee get in here, but since, but one of the critiques from the younger generation is just that, Nkechi, that what Winbush and them put together is old. What you put together is old. Those arguments are old. They're out of date. They need improvement. Is all of that. So that's why they use the antiquity of the work against it, which I've always found interesting.
Yeah, let me just say this, and then I'm going to shut up and let that's my brother DT, y'all, and Yallo and Kenyatta going and jump in there. But first of all, have they even seen any of these? Have they read any of these words? I know they ain't read this one. Okay, I mean, I'm just saying, we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. Have they read Randall Robinson's The Debt, What Blacks Owe to each other? This one was The Reckoning. I'm sorry, this one was The Debt. I mean, I'm just saying, you can't criticize and tear stuff apart if you don't know what it is and what's in it. we all stand on the shoulders of those who came uh, before us. And if you're going to continually denigrate what came before, what's going to happen when you're 20 years down the line? Okay, then people are going to forget about everything you did, or what? I mean, I'm just saying. So I think that that's
A marketing
myth.
campaign can't think that far ahead. They're thinking about the immediate moment. They're trying to win now. They're not thinking about then or in the future. But
Yeah.
Diallo, Geechee, anybody want to jump in, raise any questions, comments?
Well, I'm just gonna have to confess I'm one of the mudslingers and infighters as far as the reparation movements go, because and one of the reasons, yeah, I name call and yeah, I be in Twitter and calling people out and pointing fingers and naming names because I think there is a very real distinction between reparations and what I call prosperity politics. There's a faction of reparations that seek to embrace U.S. patriotism, U.S. imperialism, and capitalism. And their movement is nothing more than to give Black people the revenue, the capital, to fully engage with the U.S. economy as it exists, without any calls for true justice, and even to the point where they openly call for xenophobic policies against Africans of the other Africans of the diaspora of Latin America and the Caribbean, and Africans from the continent, separation, exclusion, and a strict policy enforced hierarchy that prioritizes Africans born in America against and above Africans from other parts of the globe. And, to me, that is not reparations, as I was taught by, Conrad, the late Dr. Conrad Warrill, and Bill Grace and National Black United Front. So, yeah, I think that has to be confronted. I don't even see a place for common ground. So maybe I'm wrong about that there can be common ground with literally Black capitalists and Black imperialists and Black patriots of the U.S. status quo. But when they claim they're fighting for reparations for Black people, I think they are harming and distorting the struggle as opposed to contributing to it.
Well, brother, I think we're on the 100% same wavelength here. I agree with everything that you are saying, and there's a lot of confusion going on out there, and a lot of that confusion um, is emanating from exactly those issues that you are speaking of, and the people who are spouting those issues. So,
and let me just say, I am speaking specifically about ADOS and Foundational Black America, FBA, ADOS, and people of that ilk specifically, who I think are trying to hijack the reparation struggle.
I think though, if and Geechee, jump in. I'm not bad, but if there is a difference at all between the two of you, if at all, it would be around the issue of mudslinging, right, or name calling, right? Diallo maybe gets a little more, hands on, virtually hands on, and I don't know, whatever the phrase would be.
So let me just say.
But they do ask for it, though. I mean, I'm in general, I'm with you, Nkechi, but they woo, they get grimy with it. Anyway,
well,
sorry.
what the thing is that I'm on the internet, and people don't know who I am. They see my name, Nkechi Taifa, and they attack me solely because I thought I was from Nigeria. Because my first name is a Nigerian name, even though I don't pronounce it the way they pronounce it in Nigeria. That's another issue. But I was attacked viciously on the internet solely because of my name. And I will say, Brother Giallo, I chose not to respond because, that went on for about a month. If I had responded, it'd probably still be going on today, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I salute you for standing up for the rights. My position is let my work speak for myself. Okay. And yeah.
No, right on.
Well, yeah, I've experienced the same thing being Diallo Kenyatta. I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, and my ancestors came over like on the Mayflower, damn near. We've been here for so goddamn long, but I do engage because I see that the what I call prosperity politics, which is basically, a bastard of prosperity gospel. It's very lucrative and attractive what they're selling to a lot of impoverished and struggling African people. There's this notion of a windfall that will enable us to fully, it's economic integration essentially, fully become full scale Americans and enjoy all the spoils of imperialism and all the spoils of America first nationalism. And so I think it has to be challenged directly and aggressively, because it is a contamination or an infection, ideological infection. But I do respect, trying to stay above the fray. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and hold that. Yeah, I sling mud. I swing back.
Yeah. And actually, I was really talking about the mudslinging coming the other way, not the righteous. But let me, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, Geechee, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to know if you are you familiar with the Jackson and Kush plan in Mississippi?
I'm not familiar with what's going on now, but back in the day when Brother Amari was there, and I was working very closely with Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, we helped to envision the whole Kush. This was long before Chokwe became mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. This is back when everybody was all in the same fray, and we were talking about an independent Black nation state, starting with the Kush district, which was Jackson. So you can elucidate me with respect to what's going on today. I've kind of been not close to those issues for a while.
No, I was just mainly curious, like kind of your overall thoughts about it. I know, like if you work with the father and then now the son, which many say is definitely not his father. Just was curious about your thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me just say this. One of the things that's hardly never talked about when we deal with reparations, and it wasn't talked about in the California, which I will say that report, it was much more comprehensive than I thought it was going to be. In fact, I'm very impressed with it in light of all the craziness that had been going on. But one of the things that's really talked about is one of the tenets of reparations is the right to self-determination, the right for us to determine as a people what we want for our political destiny. After the end of the Civil War, when our human rights were recognized by this country, we had the right to a number of different options as to our political future as part of a reparatory justice framework. Those options were, number one, repatriation, to repatriate back to Africa, where we were snatched and kidnapped from, not to swim in the ocean naked, but with reparations. Another was to go to another country, to the Caribbean, to Haiti, or whatever. Our families have been brutally fragmented and separated, and we had family over there and family here and family there, etc., etc. We also had the option to join this new white nation that was coming up on these shores and strive to make a multiracial democracy real. But we also had the option to remain where we were and negotiate with the native peoples and establish an independent Black nation state right here on this soil, as we found ourselves here in large numbers, not massively being able to return to where we came from, not even knowing where we came from or anything along those lines, built this land, etc., etc. What happened was, that was 1865. 1868, 2.5 years later, we were relegated to the sole option of U.S. citizenship, without asking us if that is what we wanted, asking us with full information and acknowledgement, and never making that option never making it a reality. When when General William Sherman sat down with those 20 plus black ministers in the South after Emancipation Proclamation and asked, well, what do you all want? And what did they say? They said, we want land. And that's where those 40-acre plots came from in General Sherman's Special Field Order number 15 that made it into the Freedmen's Bureau, but was then slashed when Lincoln was assassinated by Andrew Johnson and never became a reality. But then Sherman said, okay, you want land. Do you want to be with us or do you want to go by yourselves? They say, we want to go by ourselves. We want to separate. We want to develop on our own because they knew that Ku Klux Klan hadn't even come to ascendancy at that point. But they knew based on everything else, they didn't want to be inside that burning house, with the white folks and how we were treated. They wanted land and they wanted separation or independence. So we say we wanted that then. There is a certain segment of people who still want that today. But we say that there are these options, political options that we as a people should decide. And those who want to be patriot, there's a lot of going back and forth. Ghana has talked about dual citizen, all like that. There people want to do that. And people who aren't doing that, they should receive as part of a reparations settlement, reparations in order to seek to integrate as fully as they possibly can back into that African culture. There are those who might want to go somewhere else, the same thing. There are those who really do want to strive to make a multiracial democracy real. And as such, all of those policies, all these things that we've been the vote, the this, that, all of that stuff needs to be part of a reparatory justice practice package for those who want that route. But there are still those, Brother Geechee, there are still those who want that separate route. I was just reading in the paper, Tallahassee, Oklahoma, not Tallahassee, Tull, a jurisdiction that has less than 100 people, but it has a mayor, it has this and that and the other, all black. And they are part of this organization called MORE, Mayors, M-O-R-E. I forgot what it stands for. It's the Mayors for Reparations. Okay, group of a number of different mayors. And what they say is that we want to develop a black enclave. We want reparations to build and develop as a separate black entity. I said, okay, well, I wish Brother Murray was still here today because but there are people who want to go that separate route. There should be reparations to allow that to happen. So these are things, Brother Jared, that are really talked about when we talk about reparations. Saying, yeah, admittedly, I didn't put that in my TED talk because sometimes things are just kind of, I've been dismissed so much, just dismissed.
Yeah, well, first of all, you got to remember the whole damn thing. That's hard enough. I feel like that's an impossible task if you have to memorize the talk to not only put all of this in it, but to remember to do it in that moment would be hard enough.
But I purposely kept certain things out.
No, I know. I hear you. I got you.
Mainstream.
No, I get it. So that's sort of where. So when you advocate for reparations, what is it that you? Because with all of these possibilities, what is it that is being advocated? How is this? Okay. How do you see this happening? What is the? How do we, how do we get to a point that would satisfy you more or less, that doesn't allow for what I think Geechee and Diallo raise as legit concerns that I have, that some conservative element is going to take advantage of this for ignoble and conservative purposes or reactionary purposes?
So everything has been moving at breakneck speed over the past 2 years, since the murder of George Floyd, who, it's epitomized as the Emmett Till of this particular era. And prior to 2 years ago, my mantra, maybe it was an escapist one, but the mantra is, well, there's HR 40 and there's be a commission to study. And then when this expert commission comes, they'll look at all of these issues. What is it for me, Nkechi Taifa, to say what it should be? Let's let the commission. So that had been my mantra up until. And I must admit, I don't know if I should be saying this on your public radio, whatever message. But the movement that I came up with and all like that, we did kind of miss the ball. And I think that is how some of these, by miss the ball, I mean, we should have been more concrete. One of the reasons why, as I was coming through the decades, we were not, is because we were purposely trying to mainstream the movement. We purposely downplayed nationalist, pan-Africanist politics to seek to appeal to a large, massive numbers of Black people. We weren't even talking about white people, just Black people, at the time, just to not be afraid to even utter the word reparations. And I don't think we gave as much time and attention and strategy and analysis to exactly what we feel it would look like. Because again, prior to a couple of years ago, I mean, it was just part of what I talk about, all the time. I honestly, what I'm seeing over the past 2 years with 2020 candidates vying for the Democratic nomination, with the city of Evanston, Illinois, doing what it's doing, regardless of what criticism you might have, oh, that's not reparable, or whatever. The city of Chicago calling their police torture amends, reparations. I mean, it's like the state of California issuing a task force pattern off of HR 40, holding historic hearings. Ben and Jerry's ice cream, I keep talking about, issuing a challenge to other corporations to support reparations. Little did I know that we would be at that point where now it is passe to say, well, let's just let a commission decide. We need to be at the brainstorming table, and that's what some other entities have been doing over the past 2 years. They've been strategizing and they've been brainstorming, and we have not. I'm just putting it out there. And I think it's time that we really begin to do so. Everyone might not have the vision. I'm not quite sure, even if I still have the vision that I had as sitting at the feet of Brother Murray and Queen Mother Moore and Chokwe and Combat, and all the folk in terms of my independence, Black independence politics. But it is still a legitimate thing. One thing that I always say, and let me just pull this down so you can see reparations, political prisoner abolition. I have another one that says political prisoners. I thought this was the one. But most folk, one of the things I sought to lift up, because that got swept under the rug, most folk did not realize that the Japanese American Redress Bill, which was passed in 1988, the Civil Liberties Act in 1988, included not only $20,000 for each Japanese American detention camp survivor, a trust fund to be used to educate Americans, a formal apology from the United States government, but it also included a pardon for all those who resisted detention camp internment. So I said, all right now, political prisoners.
You know what? I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that. Because I've only focused on the 20,000 as a critique, to say that when people keep saying we should get like what the Jews got and what the Japanese got, I'm like, you need to look more carefully because they didn't get much. So let's not hold that as a standard. But I didn't know about that
it
one.
It included a pardon for all of those who resisted detention camp internment. So I talk about a pardon for those COINTELPRO era political prisoners and prisoners of war, not just for those who were in prisons, those who were in exile, Sada Shakur, what's my brother's name? Pete O'Neill, who can't come back here. Those who have passed on to, they said people, these political prisoners were fighting a war, fighting the war of COINTELPRO, which the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence called a war, fighting the war of COINTELPRO that had been waged against our people, that they should be released from in prison and also should receive a pardon. And what a pardon does is allows you to get your right to bear arms back, your vote, and all of those things. So I incorporated all that into reparations, and which is why, and this came under criticism too, but back in the day, we would talk about as a first, with the Republican New African Independence Movement, we were talking about as a first down payment on reparations, release of our political prisoners and prisoners of war.
See, but that's what I'm saying. And Diallo Geechee, jump in if you like. I got several more questions, but whenever you want to jump in, please do. But that's sort of what I'm saying, that I don't see, that I see being hijacked in the contemporary popular new rise of the conversation, is that those politics are not included. Even in the California task force vote,
Right.
the people of California voted to exclude non-Black Americans. You know, and I get the historical differences, but I think politically, tactically, you know, that moves to the exclusion of even where you started in self-defining as New Africans. So they don't want any connection to New Africans. They don't want to be seen as New Africans. They want the Diallo, what he's talking about, the flag waving, you know, we want to, you know, patriotic. We don't want to be connected with those wild lunatic radicals type stuff. And they would definitely not include a pardon for political prisoners. So I just think that that's anyway. Any fellas, anybody got something they want to jump in with?
So I know you mentioned that you started off revolutionary, and I'm curious.
Oh, I'm still revolutionary. I just
Okay,
mentioned gay ladies on different occasions. I just wanted to go on.
Hey, I just wanted to check. All right, but so in terms of like, I know Diallo talked about this concept of like, okay, we still under capitalism, not much is going to be done. Like, how has it been for you to be very clear on your economic like layout of what you think, whether it's communist, socialist, or capitalist? Like, do you feel like you've had to like censor who and what you are, what you believe, like economically, in any way?
Well, my politics are probably not as advanced as you all's are. Okay, I used to talk about New African Ujamaa, which is the concept of socialism from Tanzania, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, it's like the more people get entrenched in this society. Like I remember when I got my American Express credit card. I mean, you know, it's like sometimes you mute what you say. I mean, it's like it's this whole dichotomy, and I don't know how much you face this, Jared Ball, being a professional in the academia and all that kind of stuff. But it's like sometimes you wear different hats for different things. For example, I relished coming on this show because I felt I could be free on this show. I'm not necessarily free when I'm on CNN or ABC or, you know, news or even Black News Channel. I mean, you know, and you're not really bringing your full self to the table because you're immediately dismissed. In fact, the reason I decided to go to law school is because I wanted some of the things that I was talking about, reparations and political prisoners and things along those lines, to begin to be taken seriously and not just totally going off the cuff. And the strategy is working, or it has worked. I did a whole paper, a whole law review article on the issue of genocide. Okay, that was published in the American Constitution Society a journal, but it's all the stuff I was talking about back in the 70s and stuff like that. Back when 80s, when the Genocide Convention Implementation Act was ratified by the United States Senate, when I found out that genocide was not just what I thought growing up, just you're killing off all the Indians or you're putting the Native people, you're putting the Jews in the oven. No. The international accepted genocide, which the United States has ratified, is number one, killing members of a group. Number two, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of a group. Number three, deliberately inflicting upon the group conditions of life calculated to bring about their destruction in whole or in part. And it goes on. And people today still, no matter how much I talk about that definition, that is not just mass killings, it's bodily or mental harm, it's conditions of life. People still talk about genocide of the Native peoples and enslavement of Black people. Enslavement was genocide also, but we don't look at it in
that document you're talking about. If I remember correct, they call anything that distorts a group's culture and cultural expression is part of what they describe as slow death measures.
Yeah.
So there's that slow motion genocide piece too. So you're absolutely right. So all this stuff, so like, to me, like every that's why I keep saying every like Tyler Perry movie is psychological terror. It's like, it's cultural genocide. It's genocide. It's part of the slow death measure. No, but I mean, I actually do see it that way, but I'm just saying like that,
yeah.
but that's part of the, anyway, sorry, I just wanted to throw that in.
But you're right, my brother, and the definition also goes on to say that those guilty of genocide shall be punished, regardless of whether they are constitutionally protected rulers, public officials, or private citizens. And the thing is, and then it goes on to say that this is all part of the definition. It goes on to say that genocide is not the only actionable act. Conspiracy to commit genocide, direct and public incitement to commit genocide, attempt to commit genocide, and complicity in its commission. And I have to bring all this up from my memory. But one thing that folk don't realize is that genocide is the only international convention that right here, right now, today, is fully actionable in U.S. law. All the other conventions, Convention Against Torture, Political and Human Rights, racial discrimination, Convention, all those require what they call implementing legislation. But the Genocide Convention came with it's in the U.S. Code. The Genocide Convention Implementation Act. Why don't we learn this in law school? Why aren't the academicians talking about this? Why I did this thing. We charged genocide. This was October of last year, 2021. The Spirit of Mandela Committee, of which Jalil Muntakim and my brother, I forget my brother's name, former Black Panther in Virginia, Jihad Abdul Mumit and some white folks, radical white folks, and all came together to put together. I was the prosecutor. I've been the prosecutor 3 times. I was a prosecutor for this genocide convention. I was a prosecutor back in the day for the International Tribunal for Mumia Abu-Jamal. I was a prosecutor back in the day with this international committee looking at the hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And each one of those I talked about genocide. And there was an international jurist, and we brought forth witnesses with evidence from all different aspects of, issues that Black folk here face. And they came up with, coming back from the 1951 petition by William Patterson, W.B. Du Bois, Mary Church Terrell, and all the others, the historic we charge genocide. But anyway, let me just say this, and I do have something right here. This I'm just reading from my thing here. In my closing statement on that International Genocide Convention that was in that last year, I stated that we're not now talking about transfer to a third world country, as was one of the original demands from the 1971 Attica prison rebellion. They say, transfer to a third world country. We're not now talking about necessarily a prisoner exchange, as was the demand by the Republic of New Africa. I remember Buddy Ma in prison. He got me in the post office in the middle of the night, it seems, writing letters to Ahmed Salim of the Tanzania, who was head of the UN Special Committee of 24 on decolonization back in the 70s, and sending stuff to Fidel Castro and all like that, talking about what we talk a prisoner exchange. It's you know what I mean. I said the demand today is for those pardons. It's for clemency for our political prisoners and our prisoners of war, again, as part of a legitimate reparations claim, as one of the negotiated action items for a reparations claim. So I say all that to say there's a whole lot that is involved in this issue of reparations. There is, and I do sit on the National African American Reparations Commission, NARC, or whatever. One of the things they say in the 10-point platform is, or the preamble, no amount of material resources can ever compensate what we've been through, no amount. That's why it is going to be a settlement. It's going to be a negotiated settlement. And it's not, as some say, just a one-off or just a certain amount of money. I would never say money's not a part of it. I mean, you know, and I might be at some of my political, some people may disagree with what I'm saying there, but as a lawyer, I know that when there is damages, when there's an injury, you go out and you get hit by a car, you know, you might talk about, hello?
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was just pulling this up from Sandy Darity's book. I wanted to ask you about what you thought about, because you mentioned him earlier, so I did want to ask where you agree and maybe differ with him. But he has in From Here to Equality a couple things I wanted to ask all of you about. So the first thing I have in my notes here is that U.S. citizens would need to establish that they had at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States after the formation of the Republic. Second, they would have to prove that they have self-identified as Black, Negro, Afro-American, or African-American at least 12 years before the enactment of reparations. And then breaking down the numbers, each person would get roughly $392,500. Now, I haven't read that book thoroughly. I don't recall any of the references to pardons for political prisoners.
Oh, no, they ain't there. No.
Any, you know, like, okay, but what do you all think of those sort of baselines? Because I am curious, and we'll come back to this. Like, I have my own criticisms as what I think the political impact of all this may or may not be. But what do you all think about establishing that sort of criteria, the call for the payments, etc.?
I'll let my brother start and then I'll pipe in.
Well, I first want to say that when the line for the 300 G's starts, I will be there with my fold-out chair and a book, and I'll be sitting in that line. I'll be there for the sun up, and if necessary, after the sun done set, to get my 300 G's. But that aside, that's not reparations. You would not go to the Warsaw Ghetto and write checks to the people in the Warsaw Ghetto while the Nazi regime still is in full power, controlling all the institutions, the military, and the cultural life of Germany. And I know you don't like these comparisons, but, you know, it's just like Native Americans. I grew up in Missouri, and we'd go to Oklahoma, the Lakota Nation, and see those people and Native Americans. You can't liberate. You can't pull out a knife, stick a knife in 6 inches, pull it out 3. So I think the monetary element, like I said, I'd be the first one there, elbowing my way to the front of the line. But I hesitate to call such actions reparations, because when you look up the definition of reparation, it basically says you have to work to restore people to the condition prior to the atrocity, or get them as close back to so a lot of what we call reparations is actually bribery or even extortion. And in terms of like when the slave masters or the Europeans got reparations for the loss of their slaves, and that's a bribe. Whereas to me, I think reparations has to have a component as that's being lost of anti-imperialism, you know, anti-capitalism, of deconstruction of the U.S. military, a global empire, and so many other elements that I think that would, if Black people were essentially just given a windfall of a fiat, would leave us still just as vulnerable. Because, you know, as Dale Jones said, we were always wealthier than the people who enslaved us. Or as Dr. Clark would always say, you know, wealthy nations don't invade poor nations. Colonization was all about infiltrating the land of wealthy people. We were richer than the people who enslaved us. So if just having monetary or material wealth alone was enough to secure us, we would have never been enslaved. So I think even like, but I will again say, don't come play this back to me when we in line for the 300 G's, because I ain't trying to hear it, because I'll be in that line. But I would hesitate to call it reparations. It is wholly, as the sister alluded to, wholly inadequate in terms of what we've been subjected to and what we're truly due.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. We will be signing a paper that says after you receive this cash, you can't grieve or sue or do anything else anymore. Like they'll pretty much say, take this and run.
You can't complain. You
No.
can't protest.
Nah.
You can't even do the Rooney Rule in the NFL anymore.
And I think that would speak to, you know, I say all the time, Black people got all of the liability and none of the benefit of a Black president. And we always talk about Obama's election inspiring Black people. Obama's true inspiration was to the white right wing that experienced a renaissance of overt racism and political organization and power and status and legitimacy. If you start to engage with the majority population in the United States, whenever they do surveys, most of them are under the impression that African people owe a debt to America. They actually have it reversed, that Black people, as a reward for being brought out of Africa and being allowed to come to the greatest nation in the world. So Dr. Browby Wright said, you know, we often don't even really think or prepare for the backlash. We're quick to celebrate victories, which I fully embrace celebrating victories. But, you know, a lot of problems after reparations will still be here, number one. And most of those problems would intensify greatly. And so will we spend our, as right now, Black wealth will become a ransom for escaping the worst outcomes of being under white hegemony, which is what most Black people with means do. They use it as a ransom to pay off the system from subjecting them to the status that the vast majority of African people are subjected to. So, yeah.
Hey, just want to let everybody know that they should join, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. And I'm trying to pay some attention to the chat for comments or questions for our panel. So please do put them in there. And of course, super chats will be more easily found and highlighted and given preferential treatment. So don't hesitate to do that as well. But
Jared, what's that stat you had in your book about the white land ownership? Like how much % of the land was owned by white?
I don't remember the details, but it's, I mean, it was something like 4 white men own more land than all of Black America. That was, I know, part of it. You know, so
and
yeah.
Yes, and yesterday's price won't be today's price if we get reparation.
That's yeah. Shout out to Fat Joe, but yesterday's price won't be tomorrow's price. That's right.
And I think the very concept of land ownership is absurd. You know, so that's another thing about, you know, owning land is a whole nother side.
By the way, Fat Joe just did a whole nice interview on Math Hoffa's platform, which is fascinating on so many different levels, contradictions included. But anyway, sorry, Nkechi, go ahead.
No, I just want to say would like to respond to what you had put up on the screen dealing with Sandy Darity. Let me just finish the part that I was saying before, that if you're, you know, hit by as a lawyer and litigating, you hit by a car and there is damages, there is money damages. But my position is that money is just one part of a reparations settlement. And again, I say that it is a settlement, as Brother Diallo Kiana was saying. There's an international definition of reparations that includes certain elements. Compensation is only one of those elements. It also includes rehabilitation, satisfaction, restitution, and cessation, and guarantees of non-repetition. So it's not a one-off, you're going to give this or whatever the other negotiated settlements are in terms of the release of political prisoners, or health disparities, education, and all like that. Because if the damage, if the harm, if the injury doesn't stop, that doesn't mean that that is the end to the reparations or the reparatory justice. Going back to the other part of Professor Darity's analysis, of which I do not agree with at all, and precisely through no fault of our own, through the passage of time, it is near impossible, in my humble opinion, on a mass basis to have the level of proof that they are requiring to be able to qualify for a reparations as part of as a reparations recipient. They talk about DNA. They talk about census. They talk
So
about
just again, just sorry to interrupt. Just to clarify from what they said here, just to repeat, just so everybody's clear. U.S. citizens would need to establish that they had at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States after the formation of the Republic. And second, they would have to prove that they have self-identified as Black, Negro, Afro-American, or African-American at least 12 years before the enactment of reparations. So sorry, I just wanted to.
No, that's okay. I'm glad that you reiterated that for the listening audience. Many times after the enslavement period, people changed their names. They were escaping from the terrorism of the Klan, moving to other areas. They were not putting up on a sign, I am such and such, the descendant of such and such, and I lived on this plantation. Far from it. And even as we learned from Tulsa and many other people weren't even talking about what those roots were. They were trying to get away from the terror and the mental, everything connected with that. That's number one. Number two, I don't want to put my faith, my trust in. Okay, so the Mormons kept good records. What the? I mean, I'm going to have my relegations and reparations rest on the colonizers' records. Then they say, well, there's notations in Bibles. I'm not even going to go there. But
I was going to say, my brother Jamil is in the chat, I think. Jamil, help us out, because the last time I did the research, I couldn't get too far back. I don't know. We got the documents on that? I mean, like, I don't even know, because when I read that in Darity's book, I was like, could I come up with that document?
And that's not to say that no one should try. If you want to do that, of course do that if you want to do that. Right. But it should not be a requirement for reparations for the masses of everybody to do that. They're going to be coming up with a very under-inclusive recipient pool as opposed to a more inclusive recipient pool for reparations.
That's a bigger check, though. That's a bigger check. They might just,
oh my God! Well, then that goes back to that
bigger check.
Thing. And as far as I'm concerned, the number that's only one part of a reparations. And I do want to say something to you, Brother Diallo. I do have a slight disagreement with what you had said. I totally, don't take my law license. I'm not practicing law right now anyway, but I totally believe that there needs to be a change in system of the United States. We'll just put it like that. But I do not feel that we have to wait for that in order for a reparations settlement to be legitimate. So again, it is a settlement. It is just, and it's ongoing. And the type of society that we hope to achieve, possibly, if some folk do right with whatever reparation policies and practices and changes or cash or whatever is part of it, our political prisoners are coming out and they help to brainstorm, we'll be able to achieve that type of society that many of us feel needs to be, that's non-capitalistic, non-imperialistic, and truly, encompasses, us all. So anyway, that's all.
Yeah, I listen. Nothing I like better. I go on social media just to watch Black folks live good lives, and travel the world and experience and live full and dignified lives. So I am not trying to get in the way of any African people that are securing resources for themselves and their families, with one caveat, that they don't exploit or subvert the interests of African people to get those things. But I just I think we have to be diligent to make sure. We saw how many Black folks were pacified with a front bus seat and a vote during the civil rights movement. Black people like the struggle is over, even before we got the check. So after the check, it would be frightening to allow this genocide. Or let me say, because I don't even think genocide is adequate in this era. This is an omnicidal system. You know, the system that we're under is destroying the life-sustaining capacity of the earth, and the very complex life forms. Every ecosystem is being undermined, and a check, even an adequate check, even proper compensation will never address that. So in my fantasies, the resources that come through, the monetary resources and the opportunities that would provide would empower us to better oppose the systems and institutions of white hegemony and capitalism. That's what,
Yeah.
and if we don't do the ideological work to change the fundamental worldview and social theories of African people, a windfall of money could enhance and accelerate the collapse of the world's ecosystems. It could enhance and make us more active allies of the empire. There's a popular rapper by the name of Lil Nas X who was once said, I used to hate capitalism until I became a millionaire. And I just don't want that to happen more than it already is, you know, because we got broke people who embrace capitalism. So I can't imagine what they do when they get a little money. So that's all.
Let me take this opportunity just for a moment to go over what I consider definition of reparations for Black people in this country. And it's kind of welded from a number of different sources. So basically, my definition, what I say is that reparations are forms of redress provided to those who have suffered human rights abuses or other forms of widespread systemic injustices, or to their descendants, usually in the aftermath of war, enslavement, or other forms of gross injustice. In the context of Black people in the United States, the quest for reparations essentially constitutes four elements. Number one, the formal acknowledgement of historic wrong and a formal unfettered apology. And I say apology because unfettered apology because the Senate and House of Representatives both passed resolutions apologizing for slavery, but the Senate bill, so-called apologizing for slavery, had a proviso that said you can't use this apology to support any claim for reparations. So that was it, the formal acknowledgement and an unfettered apology. Number two, the recognition that the injury has continued from the enslavement era and still manifests today. Number three, the commitment to redress by culpable parties, including the federal government, which sanctioned the enslavement and subsequent segregation, and by state and local governments, industries and corporate entities, academic and religious institutions, private estates, and other culpable parties which enjoyed unjust enrichment from the era. And number four, the actual redress in whatever form or forms are agreed upon. And I say are agreed upon because it's not enough for the colonizer, the culpable party, to dictate what the terms of the reparation settlement would be. The injured parties, us, okay, need to be there fashioning what that settlement would look like. So, Jared, I see you're back. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I was listening the whole time, just had to step aside real quick, I'm over 50. I'll just leave it at that. So listen, there are a number of comments and questions that I see that let me just get to them now. I'll come back to my own stuff in a minute. And let me pay respect to Norman Henderson here. Thank you for the super chat. Is there a connection between the availability of a drug dealing culture and the denial of federal, state, and city jobs? Is there a connection between the availability of a drug dealing culture and the denial of federal, state, and city jobs? Anybody want to? I don't know if I'm clear on that question, but anybody want to jump in there on that? Diallo, you're muted if you're trying to get in. Yeah.
Well, I think he's saying that basically that the multiple arrests and convictions for drugs makes you ineligible, or if you have a felony, or even for some jobs, less than a felony, it makes you ineligible for government jobs. And I don't know what a drug dealing culture is. If you watch those cocaine cowboy movies, or if you know anything, if you know about the work of the late,
soda and sugar, the sugar industry.
Right.
This is a drug dealing culture.
But yeah, I think I appreciate the effort to connect the dots, but I don't think the drug I even hate saying like the drug epidemic, or I don't think the conspiracy was rooted in denying us federal jobs, because they were denying us jobs. But then again, the federal government and state government is the highest employer of lettered Black folks, of Black people with advanced degrees. The federal government is as Dr. Claude Anderson said, the federal government would always be there to rescue us. But I know I'm probably quoting him out of context, but in a way. But no, I don't think that that was their main goal. Saying, oh, Black people, we don't want them to have federal jobs, so let's implement a genocidal drug campaign of drugs enforcement and drug saturation. I don't think.
Well, let me just say this. I'm not dealing with the jobs and stuff part, but if y'all remember The Godfather back in the day, the movie, not the Black Godfather, I mean the original movie. Fact and fiction sometimes kind of mesh, and popular Hollywood mirrors what's going on in real life. But he said something about dealing with the influx of heroin in the communities. Keep the heroin in the Black communities. Let them lose their souls with drugs. And then we look at the whole war on drugs and Nixon, and we find out much, much, much later that it was a concerted effort. They said that we knew was Nixon talking to Ehrlichman, saying we knew we could not be against Black people or the Vietnam War, but if we, take the drugs in there and then we arrest them on those issues, on drug issues, we could arrest their leaders, we could parade them before the evening news. And then he said, did we know we were lying about the drugs? He said, yes, we know we did. So they used drugs as a pretext to arrest us and to throw us in jail. And all of this is what led to what we're still trying to get out from under now, this whole culture of mass incarceration, of which one of the tenets of our claims reparatory justice is the end to mass incarceration.
And the thing about that is, Black folks, because I remember when I was doing advocacy for people struggling with addiction, I used to hear a lot of established Black folks talk about, they don't force us to take it. Oh, ain't nobody forcing you to put that pipe in your mouth. And I had to constantly remind Black folks that this is about propaganda and policy, because white people do more drugs than us. I'm like, look around you, look at the drug addicts in our neighborhood. This is a $1 trillion global industry. It's not enough money moving through. If every single Black person, including infants and children and elders, was a full-blown drug addict, it would not be a fraction. We don't have enough revenues to fuel the drug market. So obviously somebody's getting high other than us. So it wasn't even about who's doing the drugs. It's about the propaganda, and it was about the enforcement, where drugs were virtually. I had attended a predominantly white school to become an allied health professional in the early 90s, and there were constant overdoses. They were literally finding white medical students OD'd in the labs of the school. And they had to put in surveillance cameras all over the school to stop the medical, because they were all driven by opiates and stimulants in order to get their medical degrees. And I never once saw a cop car. All there would be when there was an ambulance for an overdose, and every time there was a campus party or a frat party or whatever, I never saw cop cars. I never saw the NYPD. It was only ambulances. It was all strictly treated as a medical crisis or a medical issue. And this is back in 91, 92, 93. I'm not even talking about now with the current opioid crisis, where they said, drugs have always been legal amongst white elites and always been tolerated, highly tolerated against the white masses. So it's not even, we can't even save ourselves from the drug war by remaining sober and keeping away from drugs. Because if they say power is the ability to define reality, so they're in power and they say reality is black people are driving, or the drug addicts and the drug dealers and the drug folks, and our laws are going to address this problem through draconian enforcement, then that's the reality, even though the stats, the facts, the figures, the graphs don't back up their claims. You know, they define reality and have it act in a desired manner.
Yeah, nobody gets high like rich white folks. It's unquestioned. They lead the leagues in that. They couple, I don't know that we're meant to be able to answer this, Mr. Tom Porter. Can you split the dialectic of slavery and colonialism? If we continue to tackle partial problems at the expense of general problems, we're soon to run into the general problem. So Mr. Porter can often be more deep than I can handle, particularly in quick reaction, but I just wanted to at least bring them up. A couple others here that I thought were particularly interesting or funny. M. Bold says, I provide a service for descendants of enslaved Africans in the United States to retrieve their lineage that would document their enslaved ancestor, but you have to pay in crypto. And then we do have a question here. What about, or who about crypto as a form of reparations? I don't know if that was meant to be taken seriously either, but what I hear Nkechi saying that I really do appreciate, that I often don't hear in popular discussions of reparations, is this all-encompassing radical, it's at least a more broad radical approach to that addresses even the more radical elements and militant elements of Black history and struggle that go beyond some of the more. But so this is actually something I wanted to ask you about, because I watched some of the recent HR 40 conference hosted by Ron Daniels that featured Sheila Jackson Lee, Barbara Lee, and others. And one of the thoughts that I admit that one of the questions that I ended up with was, what form of progressive reparations can we or could we expect with that form? And this isn't personal, but with that form of mainstream Democratic political party representation leading the effort or being involved in the effort, given how conservative those bodies of Congress actually are, and of course white America is when it comes to giving up something specifically for Black people. Where are you with I guess that wing of the reparation struggle? I know Cam Howard was there, the head of Incobra, and anyway, so maybe not so what do you think about that? And then how do you see, or what approach do you see as being most effective for achieving whatever form of reparations are achieved?
Okay, so let me respond this way. From the very beginning, I've always been supportive of a federal commission patterned off of the Japanese American Reparations Commission, solely to follow the successful route that they, regardless of what you consider success, but successful route that they followed. And that was the route that the Pan-Africanist Black nationalist movement basically adopted back in the late 80s with the formation of Incobra, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. It was a strategy, it was a tactic. You need to realize the differences between strategies and tactics and ultimate outcomes. It was a strategy to mainstream the movement. It was a strategy to get people who were scared of the things that we were talking about, in terms of land and 5 states and political prisoners and prisoners of war and genocide. It was a strategy to move the masses of Black people to be able to accept the concept of reparations. And yes, it was a strategy that was within the confines of the United States Empire. I mean, I'm just saying. So we were able to show, well, they did it for the Japanese Americans. And now today we say they're doing it with the Afghanis and with Ukraine and all like that. And showing concretely the disparities of which other people are accorded rights justice, but never us. It's a strategy for people to see, to take the veil off of their eyes. As a revolutionary, no, that, the revolution is tear the sucker down. But as a strategy to bring more people along and not be completely dismissed. So we supported, and we actually worked closely with, and I was with National Conference of Black Lawyers also at the time with Congressman John Conyers in crafting H.R. 40, the commission to study, at that time, study reparation proponents for African Americans. When Ta-Nehisi Coates interviewed me before his Atlantic article piece came out, I said, and he put it in the article, I said, H.R. 40 does not give 1 red cent to anyone. It's a commission to simply study the issue. Okay. And then we get 30 years later, after Conyers is gone, it's Shirley Jackson Lee is there, and with National African American Reparations Commission and NCOBRA working again to update H.R. 40. And instead of just a study commission, we say 30 years, it's been studied enough. Let's actually have the commission begin developing those reparation proposals. So it was changed to be the commission to study and develop reparation proposal. So I've always supported H.R. 40 as a tactic and a strategy for popularizing the issue of reparations amongst the masses, so that then you have in Atlanta, Childish Gambino, Donald Glover, the series sticking reparations up in there, though I wouldn't say, you have the 2020 candidates. You have Erica Alexander from Living Single having a documentary that's, I think it's out already on reparations. You have these cities and states. We've de-stereotyped. It was scary. We've unscaried the issue so people are free and talk about. So maybe now it's time to move to the next level, which is, Jared, where I'm saying the movement, the traditional reparations movement, has kind of fallen a little bit by the wayside, because we have not moved beyond to, instead of saying, well, the commission will decide, to say, what is it that we want? And now other groups have put up what they want, nativism and this and that and the other, So I don't remember your original question now. But
I was just asking what you thought of you. I was just asking what you thought of.
One more thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have moved beyond a congressional solution. The stars are aligned right now, if you want to consider that, where, and I don't say we, I say the Dems are in control of the Senate by a very thin margin, the House of Representatives, and the executive branch. I don't know if we're going to see that configuration for a very, very long time. So what does that mean? We already know we have enough votes to pass the House, but leadership has not saw fit to bring it to the House for the vote. We know that it's not going to get through the Senate. I mean, there's no, it's a fairy tale if anybody thinks, the filibuster law is not changed or anything along those lines. So what is left? If we really want a federally chartered commission, like the Japanese Americans, to look at these issues, like what's happening in California right now on the state level, it needs to pass, H.R. 40 needs to pass right now via executive order signed by Biden, okay, to have the commission established, up and running, and have done its business before the end of this administration, because any executive order can be overturned by the next administration. So if that is the route that is to achieve reparations or some type of reparations settlement or something along those lines, it must happen. It must happen now. So the move is really for an executive order. They got an executive order to study UFOs. So if they got an executive order to study UFOs, okay, then it needs to be, why not? What is the problem with the executive order to study the issue of reparations?
And to your point, they better hurry up and push Biden, because they can't count on Kamala, because she wouldn't even qualify, if I understand. She wouldn't qualify for reparations.
Yeah, under the
She would,
under
yeah.
the lineage approach.
So she's
to
not going to
the
be,
Ford
yeah,
stuff.
she's not going to be, neither would, Obama wouldn't have either. So he
But
wouldn't have been
again,
pushing for it
that's
either.
there has been no resolution on the federal level as with
Mhm.
respect to eligibility or anything along those lines. And again, one more thing, strategically, that's one of the reasons why we don't talk about reparations solely for the enslavement era. We brought in it from the enslavement era and its living legacies, its vestiges that last all the way down to the day, and all of those issue areas, whether it's wealth, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's peoplehood, nationhood. What did I miss? Education, health, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I always say that the harms from the enslavement era and beyond were multifaceted. Thus, the remedies must be multifaceted as well. And that a reparations settlement can and should be in fashion in as many ways as necessary to equitably address the incalculable injuries that we have sustained as a result of this crime against humanity. And I talk about that in my TED talk. I just remember I was supposed to be talking about in my
No,
TED
that's
talk.
fine. That's fine.
One more thing, if I can, that
Sure.
I have a memoir also, Black Power, Black Lawyer, My Audacious Quest for Justice, that talks about a lot of the things that I've talked about today and bringing it all in perspective. Just wanted to.
And you also have, if I understood correctly, Reparations on Fire is a forthcoming work, right? Is
forthcoming
that
Reparations on Fire, How and Why It's Spreading Across America? I have a poster board on it as well, and it basically highlights. Also, Reparations on Fire is going to include the text from Reparations, Yes, that was published back in 1987 by myself, Brother Mario Bedelli, and Chokwe Lumumba. I'm the only living author of this book, so it's going to, and the appendix is going to include the text from this book as well, which is a revolutionary. I'll just leave it at that.
All right. No, I definitely look forward to that, and we'll have you back to talk about it once the book comes out. Diallo, do you want to jump in? Anybody want to jump in? Go ahead. I don't know. You freezing a little bit. Yeah, you breaking up a little bit. Just real quick, Yipper 99 is 40 acres and a Bentley for me. Okay, I hear you. All right. Free this land for its indigenous inhabitants. Free Africa for Africans. Right on. Diallo, I think we can hear you, or maybe not. I think he's frozen there. You freezing up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Reparations means repair, return to before harm. The knife is still in our backs. Yeah. And soda. That's right. Solidarity to dispersed Africans. What's the call? Free them all. 20 million pounds in 1836 was 20% of the government spend that year, the equivalent to 200 billion pounds. I'm sorry, 20 million in 1836 was 20% of the government spend that year, the equivalent to 200 billion pounds today. Please do, everybody, check I'm gonna chop up the stream here and put up a separate video so that people can earn their People's Army t-shirt. Reparations and separation.
No, it ain't gonna be no
Bitcoins. Ain't gonna be no separation.
No, there's no sanctuary. I mean, I just have to be concrete on everything. There's no sanctuary. There's no way to escape the dioxin, the microplastic, the nuclear fallout, global warming, deforestation, acidification, melting polar caps, not to mention drones and the aircraft carriers. There's no separation. When Black talk about moving, if you have to find a better vantage point from which to struggle, I support you. But if you think you're finding a sanctuary away from the ravages of global white hegemony, it's a globalized system. I don't know where you can go. Hell, they already on the moon and Mars. Where are you going? I'll go with
UFOs.
you. I'll collect some cans to save up some money to go with you. Where? Which part we are going? That's what they said. Which part we are going? you know.
No,
But
I hear you. Yeah, go ahead. Uh-oh, he froze up again. That was it. You talked about there's no escape, and there's no they froze you in time on that one. Look at that. Talking all that trash. They got him. But Blood Honey definitely agrees with Diallo's previous point. Land ownership is completely manufactured. No paperwork. You have a BB Rodriguez, you said we should all have easy access to our 4 grandparents for paperwork proof of our heritage and rights to reparations. I hope I'm misreading that. That would be wildly difficult, I think, and misunderstanding of the Black experience here. But anyway, Diallo, are you back? You want to try again? I think you're muted now. But go ahead. Yeah.
am I back? I'm gonna say something to get
again.
me even more. I mean, here's the thing. Where I see the issue with that, I think it's not addressed enough in the reparations movement. Number one, we're trying to make a legal argument to a people who have no respect for legality. We trying to make a moral appeal to a people who have demonstrated no capacity for morality or empathy. We're even trying to make a reasoned argument to a completely irrational system and an irrational race. They told us, their leaders told us, with their own mouths, they operate off of mutually assured destruction. That's how they operate. That's their negotiating point. If you don't have the will and capacity to harm them as much as they do to harm you, then there's no negotiation. They're just going to enforce their will. And I don't hear us talking enough about what sanctions or consequences we will level against the U.S. government, existing U.S. entities, multinational corporations, or LLCs. Now we got LLCs. These LLC fetish that's going on in the hood, but the real multinational, the owners of the means of production, the true capitalists. We don't talk enough about what sanctions are we going to mobilize ourselves to level against these people who fail to meet our demands based on a legal, moral, or rational or reasonable argument. And I think if we cultivated that, we could draw from that understanding, that mind state, and Africans willing to level justified sanctions against those who have failed to pay restitution, because I had a friend who was charged with a crime that he didn't do, and he was forced to pay reparations to someone, or restitution, or he would be put in prison, and he would be denied several other things that, from personal mobility to opportunities in the future. I don't think we talk enough about the sanctions, because that's really where I think reparations is going to finally rest, in the arena of mutually assured destruction.
So let me speak to that, if I may. First of all, you're probably correct. Usually, like I said, reparations are usually as a result of after a war. Okay. The reason why I feel you don't hear a whole lot of that is because we don't support people who go and do stuff and get caught up in prison. They're just forgotten. Our political prisoners and prisoners of war, they are forgotten. It's not like me standing in front of the South African embassy talking about free Nelson Mandela, which I did, and a hell of a whole lot of other people did as well. We didn't do that for Sunyata and Matulu and Leonard Peltier and Mumia and all. I mean, yes, there are support committees and all like that, but we as a people, as a whole, do not stand up for the people who stood up for us. We don't stand up for those who answered violence with violence. And as a result, we're in prison or we're framed for speaking out against it. We don't support our heroes and our leaders like that. So then why should other people feel that they should take that risk when they're going to just be carted off into oblivion once they do those things? I think that is a problem. That has been a problem in our movement. We have people wobbling out of prison, hobbling out now as 80-something-year-old elders. Those who are dying inside as 70 and 80-something-year-old elders who are suffering from all sorts of health maladies as a result, who parole boards are holding over their heads. You have not denounced the things that you talked about before. And then other people criticizing other people who came out because they're trying to come out by any means necessary. So I mean, I'm just saying, I hear you, and you are correct, but I don't think we're going to have that mass of doing what is necessary to do what we need to do to get what we want and need, because people don't see a benefit. They don't see the fruit from what they went through as a result for standing up for rights. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'll be admit, and I said in my book, I'm serious. I couldn't have been Harriet Tubman. I'm too scared of bugs and stuff like that. I mean, there are people who did stuff that I represented in court who I would spout and rhetoricize, but I haven't picked up stuff that I could have picked up and done. So why should I not support those who had the courage, okay, to do those things? But it's not just for me to speak up, but we as a people, and we need to relate everything we do to them, whether it's reparations, whether it's anything else that we're supporting in terms of policy. We need to lift up these names, and you all do it. You all have done that with Black Power Media. You all have done that superbly, but you ain't the mainstream, okay? And the masses of our people listen to the mainstream. And until this becomes standard and normalized within the mainstream, so I'm just going to conclude this part just by saying, hell, you asked Jared, I mean, I don't know what this mainstream approach with the legislation and executive order, et cetera, as Kenyatta said, the empire is still going to stand. But if every other group can get just that little slice through advocacy or whatever, why shouldn't we also? While we're still struggling for the ultimate, why should we deny our people, our descendants, and all like that, the rights that every other people get while the empire still stands, the global empire, and say, well, we're purists and we can only advocate this or get this, once we have the system and the economic structure and all like that we feel that they should be. So
but for me though, the issue is that so this is where I keep getting stuck, because what other communities got that is called reparations is a pittance and has not corrected anything in terms of the conditions of those communities today. It hasn't improved them. It hasn't advanced them. It didn't even make up clearly for what was done. So, and then it becomes a stand-in for that ultimate goal. So the concern I have is that we would get a sort of mainstream version. I actually don't find much hope in that, but I'm just saying that at best, I would think we would get some mainstream version of reparations that would not include all of the more radical elements that you've talked about. And then that would be used against our efforts to advance in the same way that I think what they call Obamacare is actually a barrier towards true universal health care as opposed to a stepping stone towards it. So that's the concern that I have when I see those efforts and I see the other versions of more popular forms of reparations claims that I think are meant to intentionally negate the radical vision that you and others may have for it.
Well, I will say this. The Jews got the state of Israel. They got the state of Israel with international recognition. I mean, I'm just saying, depends on what you're asking for. And not
but that's my point, though. Like,
no. Yeah. So because, it's not, we nowhere am I equating our power with what we have to the power of that group.
And then that's my other question of, would we want a neo-colonial imperial outpost that does the bidding of the West and suppresses other indigenous communities, as is the case with Israel? So that's what I'm saying when I hear these.
What some people wanted, at least when I came up sitting at the feet of my elders, was an independent Black nation state, not as an imperialistic ABC 1, 2, 3 or whatever, but as a bridge or as a stepping stone for a free and united, unified Africa and African diaspora. Could that have happened with the United States? Probably not. But I mean, these were the things that we were aspiring towards. So, you know, yeah.
I hear you.
And so, as Brother Murray just said, I mean, I shouldn't. Yeah, he said he just want to get his teeth fixed. I just say sometimes there are steps along the way to, you know, your absolute goal. But I think that the last thing I just want to say is that more so than anything else, at least back in the day, our advocacy and our cries out for reparations was the attempt to show that we have not made it. I mean, we were coming up into the thing where there was integration. Everybody thought that we made it. And, you know, Martin Luther King and, you know, we all sing together and all like that. But it was to show I don't even want to use the word disparity, the genocidal impact of what was going on with us. It was for education purposes. It was to seek to pull the blinders off of our eyes. Never once. I worked with Brother Ahmed over Fahmy. I know we were we were on the bus, the Trailways, one of those Greyhound, those type of buses, and he would stop at every point and would just question the ordinary. You talk about grassroots, ordinary brother and sister out on the street. What do you think about reparation? What? And these were old, elder people, you know, and folk were saying the right, you know, they say this is old, this is what we're due. So it just was to elevate the issue and to heighten the contradictions and things along. I really did not think we were going to be actually getting to a point where we're sitting at a table and determining just what it was going to look like. But we're at that point now. And it will not be the end to all. Trust me. It might be exactly what you said. End up being a subterfuge to keep us more, you know, whatever. But it's a struggle that I do believe in. It's a struggle that I've worked over the lion's share of my life, over 50 years in support of. And I just need to begin to elevate my thinking to think about, Brother Diallo, what would it look like in a system, in a society that we are still subjected to while the empire still stands? And maybe the word is not reparations. You know, I used to use reparatory justice now. I mean, I don't know, but I don't have all the answers. I don't even have many of the answers. All I have is a loud mouth. like
no, you got more than that. Look, I definitely appreciate you coming through this morning, and we'll definitely check out Reparations on Fire and have you back again to do that. I look forward to that. I've really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you very much. We've made sure that the link to your work is in the show notes, so people can continue to follow up and stay connected. And thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate you coming through.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you, my other brothers who joined me in the show.
Thank you.
Right on. Take care. All right, everybody. Big shout out to Nkechi Taifa. I really enjoyed that conversation and look forward to doing many more of those and having her back. And yeah, anyway, it's been great. Fellas.